Okay, Grandpa, would you like to tell us the story about your potato raising?
Well, I sure had an interesting experience on the farm at Far West. Uncle Charlie gave me a little patch of land that I could raise potatoes on. And they had the county fair where they asked for select entries of potatoes. And I really learned something that I think is a principle that has meant quite a lot to me. I selected the potatoes. Uncle Charlie helped me, and we had just a very select entry of what we thought was perfect potatoes. And I took them to Ogden, to the Weber County Fair. And at the close of the fair, they put the awards on the potatoes. And I watched the potatoes, and I looked at all the entries. And while there were lots of other things at the fair, that was the most important thing to me, was the potatoes. And there was a blue ribbon on one, and a red ribbon on one, and a white ribbon on one for first, second, and third place. And then there was one that had honorable mention, and there was nothing on mine. And I felt kind of let down, and I decided, though they were real good potatoes, and I was going to take them home. I wasn't going to just leave them there. So at the close of the fair, and I looked at all of those awards and picked out my potatoes, and there was one of the directors of the fair there says, "Why don't you leave the potatoes and we'll take them to the state fair?" And I said, "Well, if they didn't win anything here and you're going to take all the others there, that wouldn't be very wise to just let my potatoes go there. I wouldn't have any way to get them back." He says, "Well, you don't need to get them back, but," he says, "when they go to the state fair, they don't have any awards or anything to start out with. Everyone has an equal chance there. Yours will be just the same." And I said, "Well, all right." So I left, and I just kind of wondered what would happen. And in about 10 days or 2 weeks, I got a check and a blue ribbon from the state fair that my potatoes had won first prize from the state fair. And I thought, you know, the final judgment is the one that really counts. And I think that was a lesson to me, that sometimes there are some preliminary judgments that don't really count, because I don't think any of the awards at the county fair had any real monetary or real valuable reward to it, but this one at the state fair did. And I won that. And I told Uncle Charlie, I remember, that he sure didn't know how to pick out the potatoes, that I helped, but he really said when he picked them out, he said, "I think these are just as perfect as you can have potatoes."
Well, no wonder, Grandpa, that you had such an interest in spuds like that. I live in Idaho.
Yeah, I thought that that should be an Idaho story. But this was in Weber County, and they raised potatoes there too.
Nancy, you know, that reminds me of a parallel story. Would it be appropriate for me to just mention it briefly? I must have been a sophomore or junior in college when this happened. But the church in those days used to have what they call public speaking contests. And they would originate in the wards, and then you'd go on up according to if you won or not. So remember, I decided to enter this public speaking contest for the church. And I really worked on that little talk. And first we gave it in our ward. Well, in our ward, we had quite a few students in BYU. And I couldn't believe it, when several of us gave our talks, and I didn't even place. Right in the ward, the very beginning. And so still, it kind of bothered me. I thought, you know, that talk's better than that. So the very next year, I thought they did the same thing. And I thought, I'm going to just try that same talk. I still had a copy of it. So I gave the identical talk next year. And I won in the ward. Then we went to the state, and I won. Then we went to the district, and I won. And then we went to the region, and I won. And then I had to go to the finals for the all-church. And I got second place. There's quite a story there, too.
I was there.
But
But I didn't have them both.
Just happened the final judge was the private coach of the girl that won, so it made a little discussion among some. But anyway, I remember how thrilled I was to stand up there in the tabernacle and have President Grant hand me that award.
Oh.
So that's sort of parallel.
That is,
you know.
yeah. Now was this at the time you were dating?
No, it was
Yes,
just when
oh
we
yes,
were
he was
planning,
there.
we were planning to be married.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay. Travis Hubble wants to know if you ever had to babysit when you were younger.
Did you, Grandpa?
Well, I didn't have real babysitting jobs, but Aunt Mattie and Uncle Charlie had their family. Their oldest child was born after I was there, so I was about 6 years old when their oldest, and then they had 6 children. And I used to, in fact, I reminded of how thrilled I was to teach Charles and Ermine and John little songs and poems, just like the children were enjoying Joseph here, just the same. But I really had the opportunity to see these younger cousins, and they were just like brothers and sisters, of course, grow up there on the farm. I used to help with them, and I remember when I first took Charles out to help find the egg nests, the hens, where they'd hid their nests, and he'd be so excited when he'd find them. And he was about the age of about 2 years old, I remember, finding a nest under a big bush and clear around, and he would climb under and bring out the eggs.
Well, is were Uncle Charlie and Aunt Mattie just newlywed then when they took you as well?
Yeah, they were just married and didn't have any children. And I think that was a thought that they had. I don't know whether they knew for sure whether they were going to have children.
They were concerned. They'd been married a little while, really.
And then they had this family of children, and we grew up just as though it was our brothers and sisters. And the children have told me that they never really had it understood themselves. They thought that we were brothers, and Roy and I were just their older brothers.
Huh. How about you, Grandma? Did you have babysitting responsibilities?
You know, this term babysitting has originated since that time. I don't think we even refer to it. But in our home, I don't think there was ever another person asked to take care of the little ones except the family members. And that was just part of our living. That's what today we term babysitting. Of course, I had all these little sisters. And I remember when Mother had gave birth to my little sister, Vera, 10 years younger than I am. And Mother always had her children at home. They did in those days. And I know we used to always have some woman come in and kind of take over when Mother had her baby. She'd be there for 10 days or 2 weeks. And we didn't like it. And she was very strict with us. So I recall Mother decided, we talked over, she decided I'd be her nurse. 10 years old. I didn't know anything about anything. But I took care of Mother after Vera was born, so Vera became my baby. And it just comes back to me now that she was a beautiful little girl. She's a beautiful woman. And I remember when she was just a little tot, I taught her to say, I'm Jennie's girl. Not like little Joseph, you know. And it used to make my other sisters a little jealous. They couldn't get her to say, I'm Mary's girl. I'm Jennie's girl. That kind of pleased me. I remember I'd stand her up on the table and she'd jump into my arms from quite a distance. But we always, my dad mentioned something about it. It's more fun than a doll to have Joseph here. That was really the joy of our lives, these little sisters. It was fun to dress them up, take care of them, and give them baths, and just do everything. It was just that way.
Did your parents ever leave on a trip, though, and leave the children when you were still young at home? Did they ever?
I don't think Mother ever went with Father until, well, they did go on a trip to California, but when we children were old enough to be left alone, the older ones were old enough to take care of them. I don't ever recall any other situation. Mother stayed at home most of the time.
That's really significant that you and Vera have been so close through the years, both being in Idaho Falls then.
They sure are close there, and they visit each other. Vera comes over and has Mama help her with their Relief Society lessons.
Okay, Grandpa, we'd like to know if you lived someplace else before moving in with Uncle Charlie.
Well, I remember a little bit about being with Aunt Ellen, my father's sister, Aunt Ellen Crowther, and Uncle Albert. And actually, Uncle Albert and Aunt Ellen were living in Idaho Falls when Mother died. And they helped Father with Roy and I. And of course, Maud was just newly born. And one of the interesting stories that I've heard, I didn't, of course, remember it, that another lady had a baby about the same time, and she took Maud and breastfed Maud as well as the other baby. That was the way they didn't have formulas and food for babies, apparently, and so this other lady. And Grandma Brunt, Mother's mother, took Maud and really had charge of her. And Aunt Ellen and Uncle Albert then moved from Idaho Falls to Ogden area out at Slaterville, just a little rural ward out of Ogden. And they took us with them. And then I remember several scenes in Slaterville of Aunt Ellen fixing us hot bread and honey and eating it on their porch. And then I have a very clear memory of one day moving out to far west to Grandma and Grandpa's and Uncle Charlie's and Aunt Mattie's. The decision was made that we would go and live with them, and I remember driving in the buggy, and I remember the first experience of being left there, and I wanted to know where Grandpa was. Said he's down in the field in what they call the school land. And I ran down. I would have been 4 years old, but I just ran down there and found Grandpa irrigating down in the school land. And I ran up behind him, and he threw up his arms and in the Swedish and mixed English, good gracious, I thought it was a little pony. And he picked me up, and that was kind of our first entry, or my first recollection of moving from living with Aunt Ellen and Uncle Albert, and coming with Uncle Charlie and Aunt Mattie and Grandma and Grandpa Groberg. I thought Aunt Mattie was the most beautiful lady. She was, of course, very young and very attractive and so sweet and so interested. And I think about it now, I imagine how challenged she was to think of having these two boys as a real assignment and responsibility. She never indicated anything except love and gratitude and willingness to do everything that she could to make us feel like we belonged and we were to be cared for and given every opportunity. I mentioned once before that we really worked pretty good as we got older, but you know, at 4 and 5 years old, and then I got sick for a while with an acute attack of Bright's disease and was just almost a medical patient. And Aunt Mattie just took care of me without it. I never thought of anything but what she was just happy to take care of me and glad she could do it and interested in having me get well.
She really was a beautiful person with a beautiful spirit, very unusual person. You remember, Nancy, there was just a year between the death of his mother and his father, and for quite a period before his death, his father was ill, but they couldn't have lived very many places. Just one other family besides.
Good. Now you grew up with Leroy, but how did you maintain a closeness to Maud as she was in Idaho Falls?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I always felt like I had two homes, one in Idaho Falls and one in Far West. And we would go up every year and spend time with Grandma Brunt and Maud. And Maud would come down and spend some time with us in Far West. And Maud was always kind of a inspiration to me, and I'm sure to Roy, because she just lived with the thought that she had two big brothers. If ever she had any problems or any needs, they could take care of it. She just had that feeling all the time, and we had that feeling that we could, that we had a little sister, and Grandma Brunt used to have a little English statement whenever we were with Maud when she was little. Grandma would say, "Now mind Maudie, and what she meant was be aware of her, take care of her. Mind meaning be aware and be thoughtful and be a protector of her. Mind Maudie," she used to say, and Grandma was a little English lady that she always used the H's all the time, and she was just a real English lady and very devoted to Maud. It was her life to take care of Maud, and she taught Maud that she had brothers that would be able to protect her too, and that was her statement, mind Maudie, mind Maudie.
Did you write letters back and forth, or just see each other?
Well, I'm sure there was correspondence back and forth, but the first recollection I really have of writing letters was when Maud told me that she was seriously thinking of getting married. And I remember I wrote her a long letter telling her how important that decision was. And she actually made me feel like she wanted to know how I felt about it and whether I approved. And but I'm sure we did write letters over the years and made arrangements for the visits and trips back and forth.
Grandma, a few of us want to know when you started playing the organ, and why did you choose the organ, and a little bit about your music.
That's a good question. I'm not sure I can tell you exactly when. When I was about 8 years old, I took piano lessons for 1.5 years from Professor C.W. Reed. That's really all the training I had. And then when we were, I guess the latter part of our high school years, in the 5th ward where my family lived, just a block and a half over, less than that, a block, they bought a new pipe organ, and they had to have someone play it. A beautiful organ. I remember J.J. McClellan came down and played it as an opening, whatever you call that when you install an organ. So Professor DeYoung lived in our ward, and also brother and sister Madsen, Florence Jefferson Madsen, and her husband who was in charge of music at the Y.
Franklin Madsen.
And Franklin was her husband, right. And also Leroy Robertson, who received the National Reinhold Award of $25,000 for being the outstanding composer in the United States. So we had quite
He wrote the Book of
a group all in our ward. But anyway, Brother Dion gave me 6 or 8 lessons on the organ. And that, I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go over and practice. I really practiced, I felt very much the responsibility. First, I became the primary organist and just played the piano, then the Sunday school, then the ward organist. And after we were married, I don't know, it seemed like I was always playing the organ, either the ward organist or the stake organist. So there wasn't a lot of training. It was really more just a lot of practice. I was never really that good, but I could accompany fine.
And then you played the organ at the temple for several years when the temple was open.
See, we have a picture here of Grandma by the organ. Is this the organ in the 5th ward?
That's the old 5th ward. Mother insisted on getting that picture before we left.
Well, that's a choice picture. We enjoyed having that. Can you focus in on that, Nancy?
Oh, it's a little...
Hold it.
It'll show up there. Maybe if you could hold it back just
We focus on that.
That was really a
Getting a glare.
long time institution. I remember seeing that picture when I first met Mama, and her mother was so pleased with it and told about her playing there all the time, and I saw her and listened to her play too when I'd go to church there. She was still playing when we were going together.
I was a very conscientious organist, but I was also a student. I'll never forget, I had to rush home from school. We always ran, to play for a funeral in our ward. Mother'd always have something like a bowl of hot soup. And I rushed in and took about 2 spoonfuls of that hot soup and looked, and I could see the funeral procession stopping over at the ward, and I was at home. I'll tell you, I never ran so fast in all my life. And I got over there and up and turned on that organ before they actually walked in and was playing it, but I'll never forget that experience. Speaking of the organ, I remember just a very few short years ago when your daddy asked me if I'd play this organ, and at that particular time I hadn't been playing it for quite a while because I was really having trouble with my vision. I really couldn't see the notes, but I overcame that. got new glasses and so on. So sometime I haven't played it for years, but I want to. I accepted the invitation years later, and I'm going to determine to play that sometime. Not that I'm that good, just enough, because I love to do what he asked me.
Were your parents musicians? Like, did all of your sisters take piano lessons, and was that part of the family?
All the sisters took some, yes. And my sister Mary became very excellent on the violin, and my sister Ruth on the cello. The three of us used to go all over Provo, playing at funerals, at weddings, and so on.
How about your parents? Did they play?
I don't think Mother did, but Father.
He had one piece.
Father, when he was a little boy, all of them had played piano. And just before Father died, he died at age 92, and I think he must have been 90. He could still play this Starlight Waltz. I'm sure the our children have learned that. You probably know that little da-da-dum, da-dum, da-da-dum. It used to delight the grandchildren to hear him play that. He never forgot it.
That used to always be a part of the program when we'd ever have Grandpa there. He'd play that one piece. And he used to enjoy it.
Kind of like my dad playing Old Black Joe.
Yeah, the same thing.
Good. Why don't you take a minute and tell us about some early Christmases and perhaps the first Christmas you could remember?
Well, one of the first ones I remember was when we were expecting to have Santa Claus bring a gunmetal watch. And we had catalogs, these Sears and Roebuck and Montgomery Ward catalogs that had pictures. I had never seen a gunmetal watch, but in these pictures they're so shiny, and they were kind of a shiny black color. And all the watches that I had seen had either been silver or gold watches, but we had quite a build-up about these gold metal, or these gunmetal watches. And we had our stockings hung up, and there was an orange and an apple, and there were nuts and candy. And I remember I was so anxious, and finally right in the toe, just a little bit of a watch, this gunmetal watch. And that was real special. And that's the first Christmas that I remember. I probably was, maybe it was when I was 5 years old. And, the first one I remember, hanging up our stocking and getting that gunmetal watch. What's your first moment that you remember?
Yeah. You know, things are different, of course, now than they used to be. As a child, this will surprise you, but we never did have a Christmas tree. We'd put our chairs in the semicircle in the big living room, and we all knew where our own chair was. But I do remember one Christmas very vividly, and I must have been, 7 or 8 at least. And we put our socks on the chair. And Mother had my sister Mary and I take our little sister Jean, who later we lost in an accident, but she was about 2, to sleep with us because Mother wasn't feeling very well. Sure, she was going to have a baby, but I don't recall that. So we got to take Jean up, and that we were excited. That was fun. But in the middle of the night, little Jean woke up, started to cry. This was upstairs, but I was afraid it was going to wake up Mother. And I thought, oh dear, what can I do to quiet this little girl? And then I thought, well, we always got a doll for Christmas. I didn't dare turn on any lights. There were other bedrooms up there. But and we lived in the farthest, our room was in the farthest bedroom. I remember feeling my way through that hall, clear down the stairs to the living room, feeling the chair, so I came to mine. I knew where it was. And feeling around, sure enough, there was a doll, and there was a book. And that's what I got, except we'd always get a stocking full of orange and apples, nuts, lots of nuts was in there. But anyway, I took the doll up and the book upstairs and went clear back upstairs. And I gave the doll to little Jean, and that settled her. She was so excited, she just held that doll. She finally went back to sleep. But I had the light on, so I just had to look at that book. And I ended up reading it from beginning to end. And by then, you know, I about had it. And but before anyone stirred, I slipped clear down through those dark halls and steps and put that book and doll back where it belonged. Never did tell anyone.
Do you remember what book it was?
Yes. It was a horrible book. It wasn't the full thing, but it was Grimm's Fairy Tales, and if you've ever read them, some of them are horrible.
Served you right for going down.
Well, that was a Christmas I remember.
But now you've told it.
Were there any traditions in your families that you can remember as being a part of Christmas?
You mean when we were children?
Uh-huh.
Well, I remember of the Christmas dinner and the getting all the families together. See, we had quite a few of the families there. Uncle Charlie and Aunt Mattie each had relatives, and Aunt Mattie had a brother that came there quite a bit. And then Uncle Charlie had his sister Aunt Ellen and her family. And then my Aunt Jennie, who had died young, I don't remember her, but she had a son, and then her husband, Uncle Lowell, had married again, and he had a family, and they had this one boy that was Aunt Jennie's, and they called his name Groberg Woods. And then they had another family after Uncle Lowell married a close friend of Aunt Jennie's and Aunt Ellen's and Uncle Charlie's and their family. And we would all get together, and Aunt Mattie would have either turkey or duck, or it was usually one of them. And we actually raised those birds there on the farm. And that would be a big part. We'd have some for Thanksgiving and then some for Christmas. It was quite sad sometimes. We'd get quite attached to those birds. and of course sometimes chickens. But that was always a tradition of having the family together, and the children would all share their excitement about the toys and the Christmas presents.
You know, as far as tradition goes, I can't right now think of anything special, but I know Christmas was a wonderful, wonderful time in our home. We had a real special love for each other. I was just as excited about what my sisters got as I mean, sincerely, we were just kind of that way. But I know that we often would go, as soon as we got dressed and settled up, to see Aunt Jennie. That was kind of part of it. They'd either come down or we'd go up to their homes, 3 blocks up. But I remember once we didn't get our dolls on our chairs because Aunt Jennie wanted us to come up there and get them off her Christmas tree. She did have a beautiful Christmas tree, but I don't recall if we ever did. But I remember we went up to Aunt Jennie's on this Christmas, and she gave each one a doll. And that is when we were age 9, that was the end of the doll period. No one got one. I didn't know until years later that she was always the one that selected and wanted to give the dolls to us. I remember this particular Christmas as she gave the dolls out. She gave my sister, she started with the little ones, my sister who was 2 years younger, my sister Mary, who is no longer living, got quite a big doll. But I got just a little one. And I remember it now because I couldn't quite figure it out. As a little child, I didn't realize that mine was really a better quality. The size was what impressed me. It bothered me. I couldn't figure out why Mary's doll was much bigger than mine. Little children,
Have you kept any of the dolls? Do you have any of the dolls
I
still?
wish I did. Nancy, we used them up. We really just played with them all the time. We have the whole family of dolls.
Uh-huh. Good. My little sister Jennie wants to know if any of you ever have broken any bones when you were younger. You ever had a broken arm or a broken leg?
I had a sprained ankle, I remember once, that I thought was pretty painful, and went to the doctor. And so, Jennie, I'll tell you what the doctor said when he says it isn't broken. He says, a sprain like this is more painful than a break. And so I felt pretty important that I had a badly sprained ankle. But I never really had any broken bones as a child. I fell down when I was taking some pictures on an appraisal just 10 or 15 years ago up in Jackson, and broke an arm, but it wasn't very painful or very serious. They set it and put it in a cast. But Jennie, we've really been pretty careful and pretty fortunate in not having broken arms or broken legs or broken bones.
I don't recall ever having a broken bone. However, as I think I mentioned yesterday, we used to always deliver milk to several neighbors. And I remember one winter morning as I was taking the milk, I really slid on the ice and fell and really hurt my ankle. But somehow I made it to the neighbors and took the milk and came home. And oh, that ankle did hurt. But we didn't do anything about it. But it hurt for so long, I've often wondered since that the leg's been just a little bit off. If maybe we just didn't used to go to doctors in like we do now. It's quite a different way of living.
How were you disciplined by your parents? Like if you were to say no when they asked you to do something, if you ever did.
Well, of course, Uncle Charlie and Aunt Mattie really had quite a challenge to have us obey. And I remember Roy and I at times would get together and talk about the way they disciplined us. They used to have little switches, and we would at times deserve disciplining, but it wasn't near as bad as we thought it was when they'd give us a little switching for disobeying when we were supposed to be home at a certain time, and we'd play and stay longer. And they'd say, now, you were told not to stay longer than this, and you had your work to do, and you'll just get a switching. And it was really never very severe, but Roy and I can remember several times of kind of getting in a little corner and talking about when we had children, we weren't going to ever switch them. But it was done in the idea of teaching us, and I can appreciate that they didn't want us to grow up thinking that we didn't have to obey, and I've appreciated that was the right way to teach us at that time, was to let us know that there was punishment for disobedience.
Well, my answer to that is I can't remember of ever being really disciplined. I'm sure I was, and I'm sure I deserved it. As far as saying no to your parents, can't remember of ever doing that either. We were just not that way. I don't know how to explain it, but I just don't recall anything like that.
But I don't remember of ever just being right defiant and just saying, no, I won't do it. It was just being kind of unthoughtful of orders sometimes, and forgetting and just staying and playing and not doing the things that were supposed to be done.
I read a joke not too long ago about some teenager asking her mom, about this same situation. Did you ever say no and defiantly to your parents? And her mother says, I didn't know we could. And in a way that never even occurred to her.
Good. Why don't you tell us what your memories of World War I are?
Well, I remember very well the end of World War I. We were out in the potato field, and it was, I guess, the 11th of November. We were out picking up potatoes, and there apparently had been a little notice that maybe the war would end, but all at once we heard the whistles blowing. We had whistles that of the factories that would give us the time. They'd blow at 5 o'clock or at 6 o'clock or at noon whistle. And the whistle started to blowing, and all at once everyone in the field started to throwing up their potato baskets and throwing up their hams and shouting and yelling, and the war's over, the war's over. That's the sign, that's the message. The war has ended. And that was, of course, I would have been 12 years old in 1918. And but I was out in the field, and then I remember the newspaper that came, probably the next day, or we had a delivery of newspapers, and the big headlines was Armistice signed, war ends. That big broadside paper, and it was an extra, and it came out.
Well, I was 10 years old when the armistice was signed, and I remember vividly about the same, all the whistles and bells. All the neighbors got out in the street with a kettle with a lid to bang or anything that would make a noise, and they really had quite a parade. It was quite a celebration. One thing I do remember vividly, when was the flu right after, right before?
It was right at that time.
Right at that time, there was a terrible epidemic of what they called the flu. In fact, it was so bad, you may have remembered reading this in history, that we couldn't even go to church. We couldn't go shopping. No public meetings could be held. People just died. So many, I think more of them were lost in the war. And I remember in our home, everybody was sick except me. And I took care of the others. I just didn't get sick. And I remember that we used to wear masks, just pieces of gauze folded over and over and fastened to tie in the back. But I remember how grateful Mother and Father were. They were so sick they couldn't get out of bed. And I was just fine, so I'd take care of the others and do what happened. But you couldn't really get doctors or anything. It was terrible. That flu epidemic. In fact, didn't Brother Joseph F. die?
Yeah, President Joseph F. Smith died during the 1918 flu epidemic, and they couldn't hold a public funeral for President Joseph F. Smith.
But I remember, too, when the soldiers were going from America over to France and Germany and so on, some of the songs we'd sing, everybody, every place you went would sing these songs. Do you remember?
over there, over there, send the troops over there, and we won't come back till it's over there.
Yeah. And then keep the home stars burning
While your hearts are
yearning.
Though our boys are far away, they dream of home. Yeah, those are.
There's a lot of singing and just sweet songs.
We used to have there was a play I remember during the war, and I thought it was quite daring. In fact, any kind of swear words were really not a part of our vocabulary or a part of our thoughts, but this play and the newspaper print on it, "To hell with the Kaiser." and they really blamed Kaiser Bill. He was kind of the villain and the big bad man. And that was one of the things that when our soldiers would go, they'd say, "Going to fight Kaiser Bill."
What was going to church like when you were a child? Was it hard to sit through the long meetings, or what was the schedule like?
How was it at your place, Grandma?
Well, going to church was just as accepted as eating or sleeping. We'd always go together, all of us. We'd always go to all the meetings, everything. Now, she mentioned that you get weary. Of course, you know, it wasn't like it is now. We'd have Sunday school in the morning and sacrament meeting in the afternoon, and primary on Wednesday afternoon, and mutual on Tuesday night. It was all broken up. And I don't know, I do remember that some of the teachers I didn't like as well as I liked some of the others, especially in primary. And I remember they had me play the piano in primary, and that was kind of hard. I had to practice so hard to learn those. I was just a little girl to learn those songs. But I was very young when they made me the Sunday school secretary, and I thought, well, if I'm that, I'm quite grown up, and I really dressed up and fixed up to look older than I really was. Although I must have been an awful secretary for such, I was so young. But I remember also Mother used to always bear her testimony, and that was beautiful. I remember Grandpa Brimhall was always there, always down on the stand. Aunt Jennie and Uncle Will, when they were available as the counselor in their leave side, she traveled a lot. And as a member of the state presidency, he was gone a lot. But they were such a part of our family. Grandpa Brimhall, not necessarily the others. You know, we loved them and all, but we just somehow were not that close to the second family. But I enjoyed going to church. We always, I don't know, maybe you're going to talk about Saturday, are you, a little later?
Go ahead.
You know, this little primary song we sing today, Saturday is a special day. It's the day we get ready for Sunday. That literally was the case in our home. On Saturday, we'd all have our baths once a week. We had a big tub, and we'd fix the food, and we'd clean the house, and everybody'd have their clothes all laid out and clean. And then when the Iceman came on Saturday, in those days we didn't have electric refrigerators or freezers or anything like that. The Iceman would come and put this huge piece of ice in our refrigerator. One compartment was for ice, and then we'd fill it with food. But we'd get extra ice, and we'd always make ice cream, you know, chop the ice and freeze ice cream. That was for Sunday. I don't know how we kept it over. Mother, we'd always have, I shouldn't say always, but very often have chicken. I remember how horrified it was when there was no one else around, and Mother would chop off the head of a chicken. I couldn't believe my little mother being able to do that. Then we'd clean the chicken, or two maybe, and all that on Saturday, and get everything ready for Sunday. I remember, too, we didn't always have chicken, but when we'd leave for church, for Sunday school, see it'd be at least 2 hours in. Mother'd put a roast in the oven, and then just before we left, she'd put vegetables. That was our meal, you know, so that when we came home it was all cooked. Saturday was fun. We all had a lot of work to do, and we did it. It was fun to be so ready for Sunday. That Sunday was so special.
Like
So
a holiday.
We'd always have, what did we do extra? I don't know. We'd have company come in. We always, every week, we always had family. We call it home evening. Sometimes on Sunday, sometimes Saturday night.
We used to have the song all the time, Sunday school, promptly at 10 in the morning. And we used to come home after Sunday school and then go back again at 2 o'clock for our sacrament meeting. I remember the bishop of our ward at Far West, Moroni Chug. He was a good friend of my father. They were about the same age and they grew up together. I'm sure he was aware of the fact that Roy and I were his friends' sons, and he felt a special interest in us. I remember how he gave me a job, and it must have been just after I was baptized, because I used to have to go, or felt like I had to go early, because my job was taking the songbooks around, placing them, and then gathering them up again. And I remember how Bishop Chug told me that he really couldn't operate the ward without me, that I had to help him do that, that if the songbooks weren't out, we couldn't sing, we wouldn't have the music, and it was really an important calling.